The autumn rain drummed against the windows of Rosewood High School's cafeteria, creating a steady rhythm that seemed to echo the hunger gnawing at 16-year-old Miguel Santos's stomach. He sat alone at the corner table, the same spot he'd claimed every day for the past 3 months since transferring to this affluent suburban school in Westchester County, New York. Miguel's worn sneakers hand-me-downs from his older brother, who'd outgrown them 2 years ago, squeaked against the polished linoleum floor as he shifted uncomfortably. The cafeteria buzzed with the chatter of well-fed teenagers discussing weekend plans that involved country clubs, shopping trips, and family vacations that cost more than his mother made in 6 months. "Hey Santos," the voice cut through the ambient noise like a blade. "Where's your lunch today?" Miguel looked up to see Brandon Mitchell approaching with his usual entourage. Brandon was everything Miguel wasn't: tall, blonde, wearing a leather jacket that probably cost more than Miguel's entire wardrobe. His father owned 3 car dealerships across the county, and Brandon never let anyone forget it. "I'm not hungry," Miguel lied, his voice steady, despite the way his stomach clenched with both hunger and anxiety. "Right," Brandon smirked, sliding into the seat across from Miguel uninvited. His friends, Jason, Tyler, and Connor flanked him like a pack of wolves, sensing weakness. "That's what you said yesterday, and the day before that." Miguel's jaw tightened. He'd been skipping lunch for weeks now, using his meal money to help his mother buy groceries for his 2 younger sisters. Rosa was 8 and needed new shoes for school, and little Carmen, only 5, had been asking for art supplies for her kindergarten class. Their mother, Alina, worked 2 jobs cleaning offices at night and stocking shelves at the local grocery store during the day, but it was never quite enough. "Maybe he's on some fancy diet," Jason chimed in, his voice dripping with mock concern. "You know, the I'm to it diet." The nearby tables began to quiet down, sensing drama. Miguel felt the familiar heat of embarrassment creep up his neck. He'd grown up in the Bronx, where being poor wasn't unusual, where everyone understood the struggle. But here in Westchester, among kids who got new cars for their 16th birthdays, his circumstances made him a target. "Leave me alone, Brandon," Miguel said quietly, gathering his textbooks. He'd learned that engaging only made things worse. "Oh, come on, Santos, don't be so sensitive," Brandon's voice carried across the now sealant cafeteria. "We're just curious about your dietary choices." Tyler, emboldened by the audience, stood up and announced loudly, "Hey everyone, Miguel here is too proud to admit he can't afford lunch. Should we take up a collection?" Laughter rippled through the cafeteria. Not everyone was laughing. Miguel could see some students looking uncomfortable, even ashamed, but enough worried that the sound felt like a physical blow. "Actually," Connor added, pulling out his wallet with theatrical flair, "I've got some spare change. Will 37 cents buy you a cookie, Santos?" He tossed the coins onto the table, where they scattered and rolled. 1 quarter fell to the floor with a metallic clink that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Miguel stared at the money, his face burning with humiliation. "Pick it up," Brandon said, his voice taking on a cruel edge. "Come on, you need it, right?" Miguel's hands trembled slightly as he looked around the cafeteria. Nearly every student was watching now, some with their phones out, probably recording. He thought about his mother, who'd been so proud when he'd gotten accepted to Westchester Prep on an academic scholarship. She'd worked extra shifts for weeks to buy him the school supplies he needed, telling him this was his chance for a better life. "I said pick it up," Brandon repeated, louder this time. Miguel slowly bent down and collected the coins from the floor. As he straightened up, he met Brandon's eyes. There was something in Miguel's gaze, not defeat, but a quiet dignity that seemed to unsettle his tormentor. "Thank you," Miguel said simply, pocketing the money. "Every bit helps." The cafeteria erupted in laughter again, but this time it felt different. Some students were laughing at the spectacle, but others seemed uncomfortable with how far things had gone. Miguel gathered his books and walked toward the exit, his head held high despite the shame burning in his chest. As he reached the door, he nearly collided with Mrs. Patterson, the school's guidance counselor. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair, and she'd been one of the few staff members who'd made an effort to check on Miguel since his transfer. "Miguel, is everything all right?" she asked, noticing his flushed face and the way his hands were shaking slightly. "I'm fine, Mrs. Patterson," he replied, though his voice betrayed him with a slight crack. She glanced past him into the cafeteria, where the noise level was returning to normal, but the energy still felt charged. Would you like to come to my office for a few minutes? I have some granola bars, if you're hungry. Miguel's pride warred with his empty stomach. I don't need charity, he said, more harshly than he intended. Mrs. Patterson's expression softened. It's not charity, Miguel. It's one person caring about another. There's a difference. For a moment, Miguel's carefully constructed walls threatened to crumble, but then he heard Brandon's laughter drifting from the cafeteria, and his resolve hardened again. I have to get to class. As Miguel walked down the hallway, he could hear whispers following him. By tomorrow, everyone would know about his humiliation. The video would probably be on social media within the hour. He thought about his mother, who would be starting her second shift soon. Unaware that her son had just been reduced to collecting coins from the floor like a beggar. But as he sat in his AP history class, something unexpected happened. Jake Morrison, a quiet kid who sat 2 seats behind him, leaned forward and whispered, "Hey, those guys are jerks. What happened back there wasn't cool." Miguel turned around, surprised. Jake was one of the middle-tier students, not popular enough to hang with Brandon's crowd, but not an outcast either. He'd never spoken to Miguel before. "Thanks," Miguel whispered back, genuinely touched by the simple act of solidarity. "My dad lost his job last year," Jake continued quietly. "I know what it's like to count every dollar. If you ever need anything, I can't do much, but I've got lunch money." Miguel felt something shift in his chest. Maybe he wasn't as alone in this place as he'd thought. "I appreciate that, Jake, really." As the teacher began the lesson on the Great Depression, Miguel found himself thinking about resilience, about how people survived when everything seemed stacked against them. His great-grandmother had lived through that era, coming to America with nothing but determination and hope. She'd told him stories about dignity in the face of hardship, about finding strength in community. Maybe tomorrow would bring more challenges. Maybe Brandon and his friends would find new ways to humiliate him. But sitting in that classroom, with Jake's unexpected kindness still warming him, Miguel began to realize that his worth wasn't determined by the contents of his wallet or the mockery of bullies. The coins in his pocket felt heavy, but for the first time, they didn't feel like a symbol of his shame. They felt like a reminder that sometimes help comes from unexpected places, and that dignity isn't something anyone can take away from you, it's something you choose to keep. The next morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching Miguel's mood as he approached Westchester Prep. His stomach had been growling since he woke up, but he'd given his lunch money to his mother the night before when she'd mentioned they were short on milk for Carmen's cereal. The 37 cents from yesterday's humiliation sat in his pocket, a constant reminder of his circumstances. As Miguel entered the school, he noticed students whispering and glancing at their phones. His heart sank. The cafeteria incident had probably gone viral among the school's social media circles. He kept his head down and made his way to his first period class, trying to ignore the stares and whispered comments. "There he is," he heard someone say, "the coin collector." Miguel's jaw clenched, but he continued walking. He'd survived worse than this. Growing up in the Bronx had taught him that dignity wasn't about what others said about you. It was about how you carried yourself regardless. The morning classes passed in a blur of sideways glances and muffled snickers. By lunchtime, Miguel's stomach was cramping with hunger, but he had no intention of entering that cafeteria again. Instead, he headed to the library, where he could spend the lunch period studying and avoid any potential confrontations. The library was quiet, filled with the soft rustle of pages and the gentle hum of computers. Miguel found a corner table and pulled out his AP chemistry homework, trying to focus on molecular structures instead of his empty stomach. "Excuse me, are you Miguel Santos?" Miguel looked up to see a tall, well-dressed man in his 40s standing beside his table. The man wore an expensive suit and had the kind of polished appearance that screamed success. Miguel's first instinct was wariness. In his experience, when wealthy strangers knew your name, it usually wasn't good news. "Yes, sir," Miguel replied cautiously. "I'm David Richardson," the man said, extending his hand. "I'd like to talk with you, if you have a few minutes." Miguel shook his hand, noting the firm grip and the genuine warmth in the man's eyes. "Am I in trouble?" "Not at all," Mr. Richardson smiled. "Actually, it's quite the opposite. Is there somewhere private we could talk?" Mrs. Patterson appeared as if summoned, her kind face creased with concern. "Mr. Richardson, is everything all right?" Everything's fine, Mrs. Patterson. I was hoping to speak with Miguel privately. Would your office be available? Of course. She led them both to her office, a cozy space filled with plants and motivational posters. Can I get either of you anything? Water, coffee? I'm fine, thank you, Mr. Richardson said, then looked at Miguel. What about you, son? Are you hungry? I noticed you weren't in the cafeteria. Miguel's cheeks burned. I'm okay. Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Richardson exchanged a look that Miguel couldn't quite interpret. I'll be right outside if you need anything, Mrs. Patterson said, closing the door behind her. Mr. Richardson settled into the chair across from Miguel, his expression serious but kind. Miguel, I want to start by saying that what happened to you yesterday was unacceptable. No student should ever be treated that way. Miguel's stomach dropped. You saw the video. Actually, no. I was there. Mr. Richardson's voice was quiet. I was having lunch with Principal Morrison. He's an old friend. When we heard the commotion, we witnessed the entire incident. Miguel felt sick. It was bad enough that his humiliation had been recorded by students, but to know that adults had witnessed it made everything worse. Look, if this is about pressing charges or something, I don't want any trouble. I just want to finish school. And Miguel, Mr. Richardson interrupted gently. You're not in trouble. You did nothing wrong. I asked to speak with you because I was impressed by how you handled yourself in an impossible situation. Impressed? Miguel couldn't hide his confusion. The dignity you showed, the way you thanked those boys even after they humiliated you, that takes character, real character. Mr. Richardson leaned forward. Can I tell you something about myself? Miguel nodded, still unsure where this conversation was heading. 25 years ago, I was in a very similar situation. I grew up in Detroit, in a neighborhood where having enough to eat was never guaranteed. I got a scholarship to a private school in Grass Puente, and I was the only kid there who wore the same 3 shirts in rotation and carried his books in a grocery bag instead of a backpack. Miguel's eyes widened. This successful, polished man had once been like him. The other students made sure I never forgot that I didn't belong. They called me names, excluded me from everything. And yes, they humiliated me about money on more than one occasion. Mr. Richardson's voice grew distant with memory. I almost quit school several times. The only thing that kept me going was knowing that education was my only way out. What happened? Miguel asked, genuinely curious now. I met someone who believed in me, a teacher who saw past my circumstances and recognized my potential. She didn't just help me academically, she helped me understand that my background wasn't something to be ashamed of, it was something that made me stronger. Mr. Richardson reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. I'm the CEO of Richardson Technologies. We're a software development company that I started 10 years ago. Last year, we grossed $47 million. Miguel stared at the card, unable to process what he was hearing. I'm telling you this, not to brag, but to show you that where you come from doesn't determine where you're going. The hunger you're feeling right now, literal and metaphorical, that's fuel. The humiliation you experienced yesterday, that's going to make you more compassionate than those boys will ever be. Why are you telling me this? Miguel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Because I see myself in you, Miguel. And because I want to offer you something. Mr. Richardson paused. My company has an internship program for promising high school students. It's paid $15 an hour for 20 hours a week. The work involves basic data entry and administrative tasks, but you'd also have the opportunity to learn about technology, business, and maybe even some coding if you're interested. Miguel's heart raced. Are you serious? Completely serious? The position would start immediately and continue through your senior year. If you perform well, and I suspect you will, there's potential for it to continue through college, with increased responsibilities and pay. Miguel felt dizzy. $15 an hour for 20 hours a week would be $300 more money than he'd ever had access to. It would mean he could eat lunch every day, help his mother with bills, maybe even buy Rosa those shoes she needed. But there's one condition, Mr. Richardson continued. You can never let success change who you are. You treat everyone regardless of their background or circumstances with the same respect you showed those boys yesterday, even when they didn't deserve it. I don't understand, Miguel said. Why me? You don't even know me. Mr. Richardson smiled. I know enough. I know you're intelligent, your grades speak for themselves. I know you're responsible, you're working to support your family at 16. And I know you have character. You maintained your dignity in a situation that would have broken lesser people. Miguel felt tears prick at his eyes. Mr. Richardson, I don't know what to say. Say yes, Mr. Richardson laughed. And then let's go get you some lunch. I hear the cafeteria has pretty good pizza today. The thought of walking back into that cafeteria made Miguel's stomach clench with anxiety. But something in Mr. Richardson's confident demeanor gave him courage. Okay, he said. Yes to the job. And ... yes to lunch. As they walked toward the cafeteria, Miguel caught sight of Brandon and his friends at their usual table. Brandon looked up as they entered, his expression shifting from smug satisfaction to confusion as he took in Miguel's companion, clearly someone important. Given his expensive suit and confident bearing, Mr. Richardson guided Miguel to the lunch line, insisting on paying for both their meals. As they found a table, Miguel noticed the whispers starting again, but this time they had a different quality. Students were clearly wondering who the important-looking man was and why he was having lunch with the poor kid. Miguel, Mr. Richardson said as they sat down, in life, you'll encounter many people like those boys over there. People who mistake cruelty for strength, who confuse privilege with worth. But you'll also meet people who see your true value. Focus on the latter, and become the kind of person who helps others see their own worth. As Miguel bit into his first real meal in days, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope, not just for his immediate circumstances, but for his future. The coins in his pocket no longer felt like symbols of his shame. They felt like reminders of how far he'd come and how far he still had to go. Across the cafeteria, Brandon was still staring, his earlier confidence replaced by uncertainty. For the first time since Miguel had arrived at Westchester Prep, the balance of power had shifted. Not because of money or status, but because kindness and opportunity had found their way to someone who truly deserved them. Miguel Santos was no longer just the poor boy who couldn't afford lunch. He was a young man with a future, and that made all the difference in the world.